You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
This episode of Mission Log is brought to you by Star Trek Wines. Visit StarTrekWines.com today for limited edition Chateau Picard, Raisin Varietals, and many more. Use our special code Roddenberry at StarTrekWines.com for an exclusive United Federation of Planets medallion.
This episode is also brought to you by Rocket Money. Get rid of useless subscriptions with Rocket Money now. Go to rocketmoney.com/missionlog. It could save you hundreds per year. That's rocketmoney.com/missionlog. Cancel your unnecessary subscriptions right now at rocketmoney.com/missionlog.
This episode is also sponsored by ExpressVPN. Go to expressvpn.com/missionlog right now, and you can get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free. That's expressvpn.com/missionlog. expressvpn.com/missionlog to learn more.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, episode 473, Innocence.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm John Champion.
And I'm Norman Lau. Each week on Mission Log, we examine an episode of Star Trek, looking for the morals, meanings, and messages contained within, and seeing if the whole thing stands the test of time.
This week, Innocence, the one where Tuvok lands on a strange new world and finds himself in a father role.
John?
Yeah.
John?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
I'm getting into it. This is part one of my 348-verse lyrical poem about the events of the episode.
348 verses. I like what I'm hearing, but if you got it down to maybe 200 verses, and then we can talk about this for the next stage show at Las Vegas next year.
Okay.
Yeah?
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Okay. I tell you what, I'll work on that more. Why don't you tell people how to reach us in the meantime?
Mission Log is a conversation about Star Trek. Drop us a line at missionlog@roddenberry.com and join us on Twitter and Facebook at MissionLogPod. While you're at it, leave us a review and a rating at Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. And please remember your comments could be used on Mission Log or Engage on the Roddenberry YouTube channel. And we'll have John's trivia in just a moment, but first, a word from one of our sponsors this week, Star Trek Wines.
Oh, I am so happy with the Star Trek wines, folks. You know, it's that perfect blend of having a product that I enjoy. Certainly I enjoy on my own and sharing it with other people. But I also love what better way to say it, the Star Trekness of it all. It perfect reproduction props like what we've seen on TV. For example, I love that the Picard series of wine, Chateau Picard, you have multiple versions of that. You have the silver label 2401 edition. You also have the classic 2386. And many people may not have noticed that in Strange New Worlds, the 2221, all of these limited edition bottles that look amazing on your shelf. Not to mention the Raisin wines, both from Enterprise and Picard. Oh, and I love this. I love that they go to the trouble of giving you those stoppers because they know how good the wines look, that a lot of these, they know you're going to reuse that bottle, so you get these high-quality stoppers to reuse that bottle.
Yeah, much like the Canar bottle, which has a standard stopper and then, of course, the on-display stopper. Because, John, you're right. Once the wonderful product in these bottles are gone, the bottles remain, and the bottles are beautiful, and they are worth being displayed on a shelf, much like, again, the Canar bottle and these new Raisin bottles. And then, but of course, you have like the wonderful Klingon blood wine, which is fantastic, along with all the offerings that they have at Star Trek Wines. So do yourself a favor. Visit StarTrekWines.com today for limited edition Chateau Picard, Raisin Varietals, and many more. Use our special code Roddenberry at StarTrekWines.com for an exclusive United Federation of Planets medallion. And now, here is John with this week's trivia.
All right. That was excellent. You're almost doing my way on that. All right. So trivia for today's episode, Innocence. We have a story by Anthony Williams. Think way back to Cold Fire when we mentioned that Anthony got the story credit on that episode. He worked in advertising at Paramount, and these are his only 2 Star Trek writing credits. So he had the story concept. That brings us over to the teleplay, which is by Lisa Klink. And we've mentioned Lisa as she was new to the series in season 2 and had already worked on a couple of episodes, most notably doing the heavy lifting on Dreadnought. Now here, she was given a pitch that was pretty bare bones about Tuvok and kids who kept disappearing. She honed it down to find the themes of Tuvok's fatherhood and mortality, along with the twist that was inspired by, of course, F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. And, of course, returning in the director's chair, longtime Star Trek veteran director James L. Conway. Now let's meet our guest stars. It's time to meet the Drayans. In charge of everything is the first prelate Alcia, played by Marnie McPhail. Now, she started out in Canada as a child actor on the series The Edison Twins in the mid-1980s, and soon after started making guest appearances on American TV shows. L.A. Law, Space Above and Beyond, ER, and others fill out her resume. But we have seen her in our coverage of Star Trek thus far. She had a small role in the movie Star Trek First Contact, which chronologically was released after this episode aired. And remember how I've mentioned in the past several times that Borg CD-ROM game that I could never play? Well, she's in that too, but I wouldn't know it because I still haven't gotten that far. Then the 3 Drayan children we meet are Corin, Ilani, and Tressa. Taj D. Mowry plays Corin, and at the time of this episode, he had a recurring role on Full House. He has also done a number of projects for Disney, both on camera and in voice roles. Most prominently, he starred in the late 90s sitcom for the mouse called Smart Guy. Sarah Rain plays Alani, and speaking of voices for Disney projects, she was the voice of Sid's sister Hannah in the first Toy Story movie. And she had a co-starring role on the short-lived Legacy in the 90s, which also happened to feature Casey Biggs. And later in her career, she appeared in the movie House at the End of the Street. Most prominently featured, of course, Tressa is played by Tiffany Taubman. Her professional on-screen credits all occur in the 90s when she had guest roles on Saved by the Bell, Dinosaurs, Mad About You, and the short-lived TV version of You Can't Hurry Love. Finally, from Voyager's crew, there's Ensign Bennett, played by Richard Guerin, as he is credited here, also known as Richard Cazogne. And he has just a few credits spread over the decades: Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman, and JAG, to name a couple of those. Spoiler, this is his only episode of Star Trek.
If you've ever wanted an episode where kids ask a Vulcan, "Are we there yet? Are we there yet?" you are in luck this week.
Prologue. One of Voyager's shuttles has crashed on a remote M-class moon. Tuvok and Ensign Bennett survived, and they'll both be... scratch that. I have some bad news. Tuvok will be fine. Bennett will not make it to the opening credits. Dutifully, Tuvok places a stasis field around Bennett's body, and then he is distracted by a rustling in the foliage around him. It's a kid, a little girl named Tressa, who is just as surprised to see him as he is her. Then she is joined by 2 other children, stranded when the ship they were in crashed, and they're all grateful to see an adult who can take care of them. Act 1. That moon where Tuvok crashed is one of many around Drayan 2. He was sent there to find mineral deposits needed by Voyager, and now Janeway and Chakotay are making first contact with the planet's leader. The Drayans are notoriously private, and Alcia, the planet's first prelate, is less than impressed with Voyager's show of technological power. She tells Janeway and Chakotay that her people made a point of eschewing such reliance on scientific advancement by way of a reformation which led them to become isolationist. Nonetheless, Janeway carries on with her attempts at diplomacy. Back on the moon, Tressa explains to Tuvok that she and the other two kids were put in escape pods by the attendants before their ship crashed. Now they are getting anxious to leave, but Tuvok's shuttle is in need of repairs. Even then, the electrodynamic turbulence in the atmosphere could simply cause them to crash again, and it's what's keeping Voyager from being able to find them and beam them out. Nighttime is coming, though, and the kids are getting more anxious because that's when the Morok comes, the being that takes you away when you die. Ilani, one of the other kids, points to the cave nearby as where the Morok lives, but Tuvok can pick up no trace of another being. The three children insist, though, that it will come at night, and they can only see it when it comes for them, just as it did the additional two children who landed with them and were taken last night. Act 2. Janeway continues the diplomatic tour of Voyager for Alcea. Next stop is sickbay and the charm offensive of the EMH, who truly does impress the first prelate, not only by his knowledge, but by his mere being. The EMH, being a construct, resonated with the Dreyan philosophy that the body is matter and only an illusion. They value the physical body less by knowing that there is an existence on a higher plane, as it were. The prelate is interrupted by an incoming message, and when she returns, citing an emergency, she puts an end to the visit and any further negotiation with Voyager. She reinforces the Dreyan cultural tradition of avoiding outsiders, and Janeway respects it. Voyager will go, after recalling the scouting parties that were sent to look for polypharonide on those moons. Only one of those parties can't be reached, Tuvok and his downed shuttle. He's there with the kids, concerned that the two who were never met but are missing must have wandered off in the night. The three remaining children insist that they were taken by the Morok. The more frightened they get, they insist that they leave. Tuvok tries to calm them with an exercise in logic. They can overcome their fears with visualization exercises, and it works at least a little bit, long enough to get Tuvok some time back to shuttle repairs. The kids still manage to get into all kinds of hijinks, to the point that Tuvok tries to quiet them down with some Vulcan meditation. The kids do what kids do, though, and keep asking questions, some of them more personal, about Tuvok's family life. A ship approaches, rumbling through the atmosphere, and Tuvok can only identify that it isn't Voyager. More likely, it's a Dreyan ship coming to rescue the kids. Tressa and the other two are awash with fear, revealing to Tuvok that it's not a rescue. Those Dreyans want the kids to die. Act 3. The kids beg for Tuvok's help in avoiding the attendants who are coming for them, and he obliges by hiding in the dense foliage near the shuttle. A team of Dreyans, armed, search the area but don't find what they're after. Once they have left, the kids explain to Tuvok that this place is for the final ritual, and Dreyan kids are brought here with the purpose of dying. That's where the Morok takes them away. But the kids have been raised with the belief that the energy inside them is set free upon their death, and it should be a happy ritual. Tuvok's only comparison is the concept of a Vulcan Katra, which he's not even sure he fully believes. With the kids now in danger, Tuvok promises to protect them and take them back to Voyager. But on Voyager, they're getting ready to leave. The other scouting party is back, but without word from Tuvok, they'll have to search for signs of his shuttle on that moon. The Dreyan ship intervenes, with the first prelate giving a stern warning to Janeway that the moon is their sacred ground. They need to transport the only survivor back and leave immediately. That's a no-go, with the electrodynamic turbulence preventing a beam-out or another shuttle from going to the surface. They'll have to work harder. On the moon, Tuvok continues with shuttle repairs while also watching over the kids, scared that if they sleep, the Morok will come after them. To help ease them to sleep, Tuvok sings an old Vulcan poem, Phalor's Journey, and it does the trick. The next morning, Tuvok is still at work in the shuttle, but Tressa shouts out to him with shocking news. The other two kids, Ilani and Corin, are gone. Act 4. On Voyager, They're still no closer to a solution to rescue survivors, but they can confirm that there are 2 crashed shuttles and a total of 2 life signs where there used to be 4. Those 2, Tuvok and Tressa, agree that Tuvok will look in the cave for any sign of Alani or Korin, while Tressa stays in the shuttle with a phaser. She's worried, but Tuvok promises not to abandon her. In the cave, Tuvok finds children's clothes, but no sign of the kids. He shares the disturbing news with Tressa, and he promises that they will get out of there before nightfall. Meanwhile, the Drayans are sending more search parties, but there's a breakthrough on Voyager when they're able to communicate with Tuvok. He explains the situation with Tressa, that the other children who were there disappeared. As his signal weakens and disappears, the first prelate again contacts Janeway with a warning that she is to stay away from their sacred moon. But Janeway has had enough. She needs her crew back and will attempt a landing in another shuttle with Tom Paris, a tricky maneuver with the warp coils to ward off some of that turbulence. As soon as they launch from Voyager, a Drayan shuttle chases them down, and Janeway prepares to charge the shuttle's weapons. Act 5. Meanwhile, Tuvok and Tressa are preparing to lift off in the shuttle that's on the surface. The thrusters are damaged, and that Drayan search party is getting closer, but they do manage to achieve altitude. They're contacted by Alcea from the Drayan shuttle, who demands that Tuvok hand over Tressa, but Tuvok says they can talk about it aboard Voyager. It's an unacceptable answer for the Drayan, who then orders that weapons be fired, at least to scare Tuvok and Tressa back down. Seeing what's happening, Janeway orders Tuvok to land where they can rendezvous. On the surface now, Tuvok states his intention to protect Tressa, but Alcea says the choice isn't his or hers to make. Tressa is 96 years old, and Drayans age in reverse. At the later stages of life, they revert to an innocent state and can become easily confused. This sacred ground, where they believe life began, is where they choose to die and have that energy released. It is the natural course of life. With Tuvok's understanding and the guidance that death is the natural conclusion of life, the two are allowed the honor of this ritual together. After their goodbye, Tuvok escorts Tressa to the cave entrance, where she enters alone. The end.
That was a wonderful recap, John, and it kind of begs the question, should we be doing our show then in reverse so that at the end of our show, we too would be innocent?
We should absolutely have done that. Let's start over. Let's just do the whole thing from end to beginning.
Okay.
Or maybe Earl can do that in the edit. We'll see. All right, look, here's my first concern. Andre, you mean you lost another submarine? Or in this case, another shuttle is down. Come on, Voyager, get with it with the shuttles. I hope, well, it seems like they got that one back, but man, oh man, that's rough.
Fantastic Red October reference, by the way.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Mm-hmm. And by the way, in that opening in the teaser, how did Bennett get thrown so far out of that shuttle? The dude can't move, right? Back door is open. He is way far away, lying there on the ground. Like, did they just blow the hatch from altitude? And he's like, I'm out of here? Because, man.
It was strange. Looking back at the episode, and then, okay, so the windows are intact, and the back hatch has been lowered. How did he fall out of a shuttle?
I know. Because the other option is, okay, just do that scene in the shuttle where he's lying there down. You know, sure you can't do, well, you could do everything else, but they made this choice, this odd creative choice to have him way far away from the shuttle and Tuvok leaving the shuttle to go find him. Like,
yeah.
Oh, yeah, there he is, almost dying.
Yeah, it was, okay. Yeah, it was, makes you go,
Yeah.
When Tuvok heard the rustling and he whip-panned around with his phaser, that is like literally like fastest phaser in the Delta Quadrant.
Ooh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But begs the question, if he's so fast, how did he get like the drop, or how did the Vidians get the drop on him in the last episode?
Yeah. Right. I know.
I'm looking for consistency. That's all.
Yeah. Well, I think the consistency is that Tuvok still does many things in this episode that from a security standpoint are not great, but he's a great guy. So, you know.
Yeah. He has the
Maybe
best
those-
intentions.
Yeah, yeah. I did think it was a very interesting idea to keep that stasis field around Bennett's body. Like that was just a very cool sci-fi kind of thing to do. However, did you notice the timing on this? That he already had that device in his hand while he's there telling Bennett he's going to be okay.
Right. Yeah.
Like, oh no, Bennett, you'll be fine. Wait, what? Why am I carrying this thing that creates a field around a dead body? Coincidence. Don't worry about that at all.
I know that, and then Tuvok's like, I don't know what this is. This isn't my bag, baby.
Right.
This isn't my stasis field generator, baby.
right. And I know that we'll get there, but, I had these flashbacks thinking like, oh my God, are we doing And the Children Shall Lead Part 2? And thankfully, we didn't. And honestly, that I thought from the beginning, if they were going to play this for comedy, Tuvok with a bunch of kids might be exactly what I need. But then, we'll see where the story goes from there.
I was getting a little bit more Miri vibe, a little bit more bonk bonk. I was waiting for the kids to bonk bonk Tuvok on the head. So
Sure, they could have done that. That would have been fine too. Yeah.
But it's kind of like the whole, so he has Tressa, in, trying to hold her still, and she's trying to wriggle free. And I always love that line, because it's kind of like what's going to happen. It's like, let me go, let me go. Well, will you run if I do? Of course she's going to run.
Right.
But then, seconds later, or a few scenes later, he says there's no reason to be afraid. I will take care of you now and see you get home safely. He says it with such conviction. As if there were, if there were tanks pointed at him, he would still say the same thing. He, believes that much. I love Vulcan conviction like that. He's like...
Yeah.
Oh, we'll get to Vulcan conviction in a gesture in a few more observations.
We will. Yeah. I have to point out kind of not necessarily a negative, but just okay. This is maybe a petty criticism, taking shortcuts with the makeup for the aliens. I mean, look, we had an episode last season where he had pipe cleaners in the hair, and now you've got kind of the V-shaped thing and the old stockings over the face trick. I mean, it just seemed a little weak, but honestly, I can understand this is a shortcut in the context that you have to do a lot of alien makeup on kids, and there are strict limits on what you can do to kids and how long you can have them in makeup. So I guess you have to scale that for adults. You just put a thing over their face, and then hopefully we won't pay attention.
I did like the old school, almost TOS, just makeup, right? Just kind of painted makeup on the kids.
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of, it worked for me. Things that don't maybe work for me as much anymore, some of the things that maybe Chakotay brings up in his native indigenous tongue, the Omnahu Pezniayetsa, or however you pronounce that. From the spirits of my people, it means peace in your heart, fortune in your steps. So does that come from the rubber people, the rubber tree people, or the ancestors from the moon? I'm the originators of your tribe people.
Oh, that's good.
Right?
That's good. Yeah, we won't know.
I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, one of those. I do have to ask, because speaking of Chakotay and his attempts at diplomacy, did it ever occur to him or Janeway to maybe have the Drayan delegates over for a drink before showing them the engine room? Yeah. Like, what a weird cut. They're in the transporter room, like, all right, here's our engines. Right. Come on. No, I mean, really? Let's stop by the mess hall.
I know, you can see them walking. Yeah. Like, what is that delicious smell coming from that room? Doesn't matter. Let's go to the engine room.
Yeah, right.
Because that's far more interesting than delicious food and drink.
Yes, absolutely. Because, look, if I'm on a ship, I want to see the galley first, then check out the engine room. Yeah. There will be many lines of Tuvok wisdom in this episode, but your displeasure does not change our situation, nor does it bring us any closer to a solution. That is one that I have to memorize and use over and over again. I love it. Yeah, brilliant, because he's so right. He's so right. Also, I love the kid, what's a ration? And I'm just thinking, ask Miles O'Brien. He loves those things.
So I'm going to encapsulate all of my feelings about Tuvok in this one observation. First of all, one of the greatest things I think that has ever been bestowed upon us as a gift, not just to Voyager, but to Star Trek fandom in total, the Tuvok finger.
Yes.
Right?
100%.
All right.
Yeah.
So the scene is, and I'm surprised I didn't timestamp this, but everyone knows when it happens. One of the children is asking Tuvok something, and I think he's just fed up, and he just turns. He just whips like as fast as his phaser draw, and he throws that finger up at those kids, and you could just feel it. There's like a force wave that like hits everyone like through the TV, and that's just basically Vulcan for fed up, right?
Yes.
Tuvok's Finger also is the album name for this episode, if you're keeping score.
Perfect. Yeah. And for anybody who's not in the Mission Blog Discord, that has now become a meme on its own, and there will be many iterations of that meme that happen. So good. I found it interesting that Kes has been coaching the EMH about diplomacy. And again, I wonder, like, why not? Look, Kes is great. Why not somebody else? As everybody else has given up on coaching the EMH on anything, it's just Kes. She's going to teach him all kinds of stuff.
After him blurting out her advice, to Dinara when he was cutting into her brain, maybe she's like, if I advise him, I might need to stick around just in case.
Slow down. Love Tuvok working on fear control with the kids. I mean, I wish I were that good. And I know that I'm not, because I know that, like Tuvok, I am terrible by speaking in rationalities to kids. So I feel for Tuvok here. This is probably why I'm not a parent, because I would just do what he does. And, he wins them over eventually. But, man, some of those are cringy. I love it. And I do love, like, they ask him, what are your kids like? Well-behaved.
The shade.
Just such shade. Perfect Tuvok shade.
Timing is so good.
And his line, I mean, this is when you use humor to its best in Star Trek, because when they're talking about Fëlor's journey being 348 verses, and he just states matter-of-factly, it may not be necessary to include the complete narrative. Like, it's delivered so perfectly, and it's hilarious without hitting you over the head with the jokes.
Technically, if we want to kind of maybe force the issue, he sang one verse, which left us with 347 verses to go.
Oh my God, you're right. That's our 47. Nice.
I'm just saying, right?
Yeah.
So Tuvok singing a lullaby to the children, it continues that fine tradition of Vulcan bards, in Star Trek, like Spock in Plato's Stepchildren.
Yeah. Yep.
Remember?
Very much so. Yeah. And a bit that I did not include in trivia, but I do know that Tim Russ was concerned about the idea that he would be singing in there, and they didn't want it to sound like sappy or gimmicky, so he let Lisa Klink know, and they agreed on this thing that would be sort of somber and almost medieval sounding. They were both very pleased with it, and then Lisa Klink got an ASCAP royalty for writing that song.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. Okay. So good for her. Good for them all around. There's a special effect I want to point out. I applaud the ambition of the CG of the shuttle launching from Voyager. It's not an effect that held up really well, but, at least we got it in there. Yeah.
I mean, I know that we needed to give, the captain and Tom something to do. I just felt like they spent so much time launching a shuttle. They just went, let's go through the corridor, into the shuttle bay, into the shuttle, fire it up, do all the controls, launch, go through, the launch bay doors and all this kind of stuff, then go into the atmosphere and talk about stabilize. I mean, it's just, I get it, but you can just do that like by launching a shuttle and getting into the atmosphere. You don't really have to go through the whole process, do you?
They spent a lot of time talking about how they're not going to do all the pre-launch sequence. They spent more time talking about how they're not going to do it than they probably would have spent doing the pre-launch. Yeah.
It's just one of those things where you can see, maybe in TOS or even in the Next Generation, it's like, take a shuttle down and find the kids. You're like, okay, so you see the shuttle leave, get to the planet, and get back to the story. It's just one of those things. I don't know it's a nitpick, but I think it's a valid nitpick. Like, you don't, sometimes this is one of those just show, don't tell moments.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, totally. I have to say that, the many things to laud about this episode, the sincerity of those final moments of the Crusada with Tuvok there for Tressa played so nicely. Speaking of moments where you show, don't tell, I thought their dialogue was really tight and efficient, and it just got us to exactly that final moment that we needed to see, which was handled beautifully.
Did you say tight? Like a tiger?
I did tight like a tiger. Yep. Mm-hmm.
I have to throw a little bit of levity in here because I think of that scene and it actually just starts choking me up.
Yeah.
Either that or it's just all the bunny hair floating around in my room.
That's it.
There's something in my eye, John.
Yeah, that is it. It's the bunny hair. That's all. Hey, look, I will lighten it up by saying this, and maybe I'm being sincere here, maybe not, but I have an idea. Every now and then we like to pitch an idea retroactively to Star Trek. It'd help maybe solve a lot of problems. So here's my idea this week. Shuttles have to take pattern enhancers with them all the time, or starships have to have probes that they can drop down that will contain like a comms relay and a pattern enhancer, like a lifeline. Like maybe that's something they could look into for next time.
Did everybody, go before we started fleeing from the existential terror? The existential terror does not allow for rest stops.
We'll get right back to Innocence after a word from this week's sponsors. First up, it's Rocket Money.
No, John, I hate admitting this, but I'm kind of an old-fashioned guy when it comes to, saving money. Right?
Okay. That's not such a bad thing to be, yeah?
Well, I mean, I'm old-fashioned because, I look at my accounts and then I try and find the ones that I'm paying for and the ones that I'm still paying for but not really using. So there's there's receipts and paper and notebooks and scribble everywhere. And what I really would have liked to have had is something that we're going to talk about right now, and that is Rocket Money. Because Rocket Money, and maybe some people remember them as Truebill, Rocket Money is a way to be able to find these subscriptions that you don't use, and they will cancel them for you.
That is brilliant. So think long and hard about this, dear audience. Think about your subscriptions, maybe the ones that you have forgotten about. Does that mean that you're wasting money? Because get this, 80% of people have subscriptions that they forgot about. That means that a significant portion of our audience and the people making this show have subscriptions that we have forgotten about. Maybe it's for an Amazon Prime account you don't use, or Hulu or another streaming service that you just don't use. So the app to use to help you track down all those expenses, well, to help you no longer waste money on subscriptions that you don't use, you've heard of it. That's right. It's Rocket Money, and as Norman just said, formerly called Truebill. So do you know how much your subscriptions actually cost? Most Americans think that they spend about $80 a month on subscriptions. The actual cost, closer to $200 or more. Yes, so you could be wasting hundreds of dollars each month on subscriptions that you don't even know about. And the app that we like to use to take care of all of that is Rocket Money.
So the app shows you all of your subscriptions all in one place and then cancels whatever you don't want or whatever you're not using anymore. So Rocket Money can find even those subscriptions that you didn't know you were paying for. You may even find out that you've been double charged for a subscription. I mean, this is your money. This is what you have earned. You have worked hard for it, and you should save as much of it as possible, or don't waste any of it if you can possibly help it. So to cancel a subscription, all you have to do is press cancel on the app, and then Rocket Money takes care of the rest.
So get rid of useless subscriptions with Rocket Money now. Go to rocketmoney.com/missionlog. Seriously, it could save you hundreds of dollars a year. That's rocketmoney.com/missionlog. Cancel your unnecessary subscriptions right now at rocketmoney.com/missionlog. Hey, Norman, it is that time of the year. It's holiday time, right? And,
right.
And maybe you or I, maybe we sit down and watch some classic Christmas movies or, Thanksgiving parades or heartwarming holiday rom-coms, or maybe, just maybe, you're tired of those. Because I know that I can watch some of those and that I'm fed up, that I'm done, and I need to move on to something else. And that's why this holiday season, I've decided to, give myself and give others the gift of ExpressVPN.com. And you may ask yourself, well, why is that a gift that has something to do with watching holiday movies or not? Well, it's because ExpressVPN is an app that lets you change your online location. And then this magical thing happens. That lets you trick Netflix and other streaming platforms into giving you a whole new library of content, because if you didn't know it, those streaming platforms have different shows in every country.
So not to shame myself or to out myself here, John, on the show, but
it's okay.
So this week, so I've been using ExpressVPN to binge, let's just say a variety of, what do you call them? Those Marks of the Hall shows.
Oh, yes.
I'm being fancy with my wording here, but those shows, the ones where you curl up with a blanket and eat ridiculous amounts of, I don't know, peppermint bark and with like super sweet cocoa, those kind of shows. So
sure.
That's what I like. I'm sure many of you out there like that as well.
Yep.
Hit me up later. Let me know. So using ExpressVPN is very simple to do. You fire up the ExpressVPN app on your computer or on your mobile device, and you can change your location and refresh whichever streaming platform that you're using, like Netflix, and that's it. ExpressVPN lets you choose from almost 100 different countries. So just imagine all the streaming libraries that you can go through. But it's not just Netflix. ExpressVPN helps you access more content on all the streaming services like Disney+, BBC iPlayer, and YouTube, just to mention a few.
And actually, you named the one that I use most frequently. That's BBC iPlayer. I love getting all of that content from the BBC that I would not otherwise be able to see here. Now, I've tried some other VPNs in the past, and honestly, they're slow. But the reason that I love and you, Norm, love and use ExpressVPN is that it's fast and it's easy. There's not any buffering or lag, and the shows stream in HD quality. So, look, if you may be tired of the cheesy holiday shows or not, but regardless, this holiday season, gift yourself a brand new library of content. Go to expressvpn.com/missionlog right now, and you can get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free. That's expressvpn.com/missionlog. expressvpn.com/missionlog to learn more. All right, Norman, I mentioned it in earlier parts of the show here and in trivia because that was a clear influence on the script that we had, and that is the F. Scott Fitzgerald short story, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. Of course, made into a movie. You've probably seen the movie as well. But I really, you can see where Fitzgerald was coming from and how this could show up in other science fiction stories as well, that we play with the idea of aging as reverting back to a childhood state, or maybe more to the point of vulnerable state. I think that's the metaphor, the parallel that they're actually playing with here. And I really appreciate it in a story like Benjamin Button, or like I said, it's an idea that's been used before. But I think it was such a sweet way of looking at really what these kids are going through, is that, Alcea says that they're confused. And we think about sometimes as people do live longer and age longer and maybe lose some of their mental faculties, that it puts them back into this vulnerable state as if they were toddlers, as if they were kids who needed to be watched after. I don't have much beyond just that as an observation, but I think it was a strong choice to use that as part of the influence for this episode.
I found it really interesting that in this in the plan to kind of like subvert our expectations, for this episode, that the Drayan elders, the ones that met with Janeway and the first prelate.
Yes.
How serious she was and how dedicated to preserving the traditions of their culture that has refuted technology and what technology has done to their culture. I think that plays into a lot of, maybe like where we see these children end up, because this culture that's devoid of the technology that at one point in time put their society on the brink of disaster. This is the kind of technology that maybe could have united them or kept them informed or kept them at least in a way where they weren't as confused. Like maybe there were medical technologies that would have helped these children or these elders, gracefully slide into these final days of their existence. And because we're essentially this planet, if we want to take a look at like the real world analogy of this planet is essentially like a nursing home or hospice, right? Where these children or these elders can live out their final days with a certain sense of dignity.
Yeah, you mentioned you mentioned a couple of ideas there that really struck me, and the first one is that there's so much that we don't know about the history of this planet's relationship with science and technology, and maybe it's better that we don't. But I'm also picturing in my head, the novelization that digs really deeply into that, because at least on the first viewing of this episode, the final ritual, the whole show takes this very dark turn, and I'm very interested in that, well, partly as a through line for Voyager, because Voyager, I think, more so than some of the other series that we've tackled so far, has this through line about death. We talked glowingly about Emanations, how that was such an interesting way to discuss and approach death, and maybe we didn't get all out of that episode that we wanted. But there's really an attempt to go there and take on this heavy topic. And then you take on this added layer of belief or non-belief, Tuvok's doubt about the Katra. I thought that was such fair ground for exploration. You assume that he's heard about a guy like Spock, but even then, where does the logical Vulcan mind go? And just say like, okay, well, wait, is this a mechanical thing, a spiritual thing? What is this? Do I actually believe what happened? We are starting with a clone, so, how do I rationalize that?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in here for a second, John, because you bring up this great point about the Katra, and that's something that it's hard to reconcile with all Vulcans say, because Tuvok's admission of, I'm not exactly sure how I feel about that, and you would think on Vulcan that's part of their cultural heritage, understanding the power of the Katra and this eternal soul that, can be transferred from, like, say, one spiritual essence to another, or one, vessel to another to find its final resting place. But the other thing, which is really interesting, is we've had a couple of examples of Tuvok and his relationship with his family and his children, right? So how does love fall into the balance of a culture that has been, or at least for several of the people that we know, several of the Vulcans that we know, have dedicated their lives to, I wouldn't say ignore their emotions, but harness them in a way that they need to be used when they need to be used, So it's not like the Vulcans completely ignore what they are. And I think that they lean into them sometimes when they have to. But for the most part, how do you not express love for your children or your wife when that is the ultimate act, some say, of that love, having children with the one that you love?
We'll see, that's what's so interesting to parallel. Like, I can't think of anybody other than Tuvok being the centerpiece of this episode, because you have this incredible parallel of these competing, not always contradictory, but these competing factors of, well, you have belief, you have ritual, and you have cultural context, So just taking it on the Vulcan end, okay, you have the cultural context of they share this love. Well, love may not be the right word. This adherence to logic, and they have decided, okay, we're going to raise everybody who is Vulcan in this cultural context where we prize logic above all else. Even though there are these simmering emotions underneath, and sometimes very strong emotions underneath. And why do they do that? Well, okay, they have certain rituals to not enforce, but at least to enhance that. To sort of keep everybody on the same page. And then there's the underlying belief, the underlying belief that logic is a superior way to live one's life, to the suppression of emotion, because if they don't, then watch out, their whole society will fall apart.
Sure, right.
Okay. Now bring that to Drea, Drea 2. Bring that whole thing where, okay, they've been through this thing that happened generations ago where their civilization almost went extinct because whatever happened, they couldn't control themselves. Their use of science, etc., drove them to a point that they were fighting with each other. So they had to form a set of rituals around these beliefs that they would only lead down one destructive path if they followed that, or if they took another turn and decided to create this whole other cultural context, that's what would allow them to survive. But then, just as Vulcans may actually love each other and show love and express love in their own way, well, you come back to these kids, the elders who are Dreyans, they want to live. Okay, but their ritual is dictated by their cultural tradition. This belief is enforced from the time that they are very young, i.e. very old. And it's so interesting to me that we get these hints about the Dreyan Reformation. Again, not a lot of detail, but maybe just enough. And you have to wonder, was this a reasonable social contract to keep people of their world from tearing each other apart? Or was this some kind of maybe nefarious mind/population control? Just decide like, no, we're going to reboot our society and say, okay, you have to die around this age because we're not able or willing to take care of you anymore. Then this brings up this whole other question about what is Voyager's claim on the morality of the situation. You know, I think we get to this very interesting end where Voyager's position is we don't have any say on that, and they honor their traditions. Had the context been any different, do they have any reason or any validity to come in and say, oh, no, but these kids don't want to die. You've only told them that they want to die.
Right. It's a fixed cultural pattern. And we've seen that happen in Star Trek before. And there's something that I wanted to touch on about the Dreyan society, because I think that this was almost part of my morals, meanings, and messages, but I think it was it fit like a better context here, like in our discussion points. So Alcea, the first prelate, says, our ancestors were brilliant scientists and engineers. They were continually developing better, smarter, more efficient machines until technology became more important than the people. I believe our society would have self-destructed if it weren't for the Reformation. And it turns out, it feels like the Reformation turns them into kind of like medieval world planet that usually becomes like tradition of Star Trek, right?
Right. They still have spaceships.
They do,
but yes.
We're going to not put as much, as stock faith in technology, as the driving force of our society. But kind of like take a look at how we are with that particular premise now as our own society. So we may be enjoying the peak of our own technological sophistication as the human race. But maybe the Dreyans asked this. Maybe they asked, has it really improved us overall as a society or a species? Or has it only improved and addressed our own individual comforts, not the comforts of a species overall? Like technology, and I think that we can all accept this, that technology has automated so much of what we do and who we are and how we identify ourselves with the speed of our consumerism that we don't really have as much social interaction anymore. And maybe that's what the Dreyans were trying to rebel against in this Reformation. Like in order for us to save ourselves as a society, we have to return to socially interacting with ourselves, to caring about ourselves and one another. So, I mean, I had this this social interaction with a woman standing in line when I was waiting to get my turkey dinner for Thanksgiving. I was picking up a pre-prepared, meal. And she was looking at a chalkboard. The chalkboard had cursive on it. And then she, turns around and, with, it's kind of like killing time. We struck a conversation. She goes, can you believe that there are children out there that can't even read cursive anymore? And I'm like, I can. And she's like, and she really goes down this road of, well, I can't believe this. And I can't believe that. And I'm paraphrasing, of course, what she was saying. But the bottom line is I said that it's not their fault. And she looked at me like she got red in the face. Like, what do you mean it's not their fault? I'm like, children only learn what they're taught. And if they're not taught this skill set, wherever they're having their higher education, they're not going to learn it. Right? Yeah. I mean, let me ask. And then I asked her, I'm like, do you know how to shoe a horse? Right. Do you know how to use the old style way of like washing clothes, with a wash tub basin, and board? Mm-hmm. You don't know that because it's out of practice. It's out of technology has reduced that to being something of the past. So it's not anyone's fault that you don't learn something, because technology has already pushed so many other ways of learning more efficiently forward than any other of the traditions of the past. And I think that's what happened in the Drayan culture.
That's interesting. And by the way, not to take it on a total tangent, but I just read an article not that long ago about the disuse of cursive writing, and we're probably in the last generation that was taught that in school. Mm-hmm. And even then, I never use it, and I have a hard time reading it. But then I think, okay, now we have technologies, though, that not only are better at reading cursive, but can read lost, well, not entirely lost, but can translate other languages. Mm-hmm. I can't speak Latin, but I can point my phone at something and it can give me a translation of any language that I want into a language that I can read.
Right, but it's not pushing the culture forward, it's pushing the technology forward. See?
Yeah. But the information isn't lost.
Sure.
And I think that's what's critical about that. Mm-hmm. I want to switch gears here for a minute, because I think this is such a provocative part of this story. And I kept coming back to it sometimes with horror and sometimes with great appreciation. And that's really the beautiful part about this script. The body is not the true self, and this is what really excites Alcia about the EMH. And I thought using Plato was such an interesting way of looking at the EMH. We ask ourselves many times on the show, well, wait, what are the limits of the EMH? What can he do? Mm-hmm. Who is he? Using finger quotes around that. But just saying that this is a physical form of an idea, I think, is at least one way of wrapping your head around it. But here's where I'm going to part ways with this interpretation of Platonic philosophy, because I do think that it drives a darker side of the Drayan culture and their death ritual. If our bodies are just reflections of some ethereal ideal, the imperfect meat of a spiritual perfection, then how can they not see the body as something that is disposable? It's an empty promise that devalues the physical body. So, I'm sorry, whether it's turning off the EMH's computer or starving the brain of oxygen, that's the mind and the body gone at the same time. I have a problem with that as a guiding philosophy, maybe because then I look at the Drayans and I think, okay, but how hard did they try? How hard did they work to try to come up with a solution where they don't just send people away to a moon to die? Let's say that Tressa is, by our equivalent, 12 years old. Is that another 5, 7, 8, 10 years of valuable life that she has that could be productive? I don't know. Or is there something that Drayan science could come up with to extend their health span beyond their lifespan?
Yeah, I think we're missing maybe a few key ingredients, again, with maybe some additional scenes that could have been in place, or you could have used some of that shuttlecraft launch sequence exposition and told a little bit more story where, again, this refusal to live underneath the influence of technology in a way has caused a schism in their their society, where some people believe that the body is not the true self, or technology is the truth of their existence. And that's where probably their civil war came into play.
Alcia has this chilling to me. Our connection to a higher plane is more important than our attachment to this brief existence, however real it may seem. And I just want to say, Alcia, that's the only reality you've got. That's the only reality that you are promised right now, because you don't. Once your energy disperses into the nothingness, you actually don't know what's there. And it just seems like I sort of appreciate the ritual aspect of it. I appreciate the cultural heritage aspect of it. But I also want to say, I look at this exchange between Tuvok and Tressa. Tuvok says, there is more in each of us than science has yet explained. Yeah, true. Absolutely. But that doesn't mean that then you can replace that unexplained thing with an explanation that is just comforting or interesting or culturally relevant to you. Tressa comes back and says, I know we should have more faith. It's wrong to be afraid of death. And I would say, Tressa, it's not wrong to be afraid of that. It's not wrong to have anxiety and worry and concern about the unknown. And at that point, it is unknown. It is not a thing that just gets replaced with whatever the comforting belief may be.
The good news, Starfleet shuttles now have airbags. The bad news, they work about as well as the exploding consoles. Just ask Ensign Bennett.
Sometimes, John, some of these episodes, they start light and heavy, and some start heavy and end heavy. And I think this is one of those episodes where we have a lot to talk about. There's a lot to think about. And let's see if it holds up to our mission statement.
Yeah. Last week I said something about that being an episode that you could just plug into any series from TOS onward. And that was not an insult at all. It means that, we're telling these types of stories that our characters have room to play and we believe it. Just imagine Spock with a bunch of kids in this situation, and then imagine Kirk with the diplomatic crisis that's happening, or imagine Data and Picard in those roles. It totally works. And that said, I'm really glad that we got what we got here, because we just had a discussion about how specifically Tuvok's family experience and his Vulcan background informed and paralleled what we were learning about the Drayans and how those cultures maybe, again, were parallel or clashed, and how we as the audience got to be, well, a little put off by these rituals, but then come to a place of at least somewhat understanding with what was happening, even if we don't fully agree. This episode kept revealing itself to me the more I watched it. It was familiar and fun in the places that it needed to be, but at the end of the day, we got an episode that was really about some big ideas. And more importantly, we have had a long run of episodes where Tuvok is just there in this functional role. But Tuvok's strength is when we actually get to see him as a person. We get to dig into his thoughts, his feelings, and yes, we know he has feelings, his family life, and this, for lack of a better word, humanity that comes out when dealing with a situation like this. I thought this had all the great hallmarks where this doesn't need to be an effects-heavy or an action-heavy show. It just needed to put the characters in an interesting situation and let that play out and let us sit with the reality, the truths of what was going on there, and allowed us to play around with these heavy ideas, again, in the tradition of what Gene Roddenberry wanted to do, slip in a few heavy ideas from time to time, and this episode does it. So I think this is one of those is kind of like the sleeper hit. You may look at it on the surface and just go like, oh yeah, it's the one with Tuvok and the children. Watch it again. Then watch it again. And then get back to me, because there's a lot more going on here. Yeah, how about you?
Well, I'm glad that you phrased it that way, because when we look whether or not these episodes hold up, sometimes in our first viewings, they don't, because they don't. I guess they don't settle sometimes in just one viewing, and we don't see the nuances in just one viewing. But one of the things I love about the mission log format and what we do, because we need to watch these episodes multiple times for the observations and for the discussion points, and now for the understanding if they hold up over time, or finally getting to our morals, meanings, and messages, we find things that we don't see automatically and we don't see initially. And that's what I loved about this episode. This episode just kept getting better the more times I watched it. And that it felt very much like an original series episode or an early Next Generation episode, where you're right, you have a couple of set changes, but most of the strength comes from the principal actors, and especially in this episode from Tim Russ.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, this is just one of those occasions where when you let an actor act, the brilliance that comes out is just astonishing. You're like, where has this been this entire time?
Yeah.
You see like bits and pieces of it. Like, was it in Meld? You know, when he was incarcerated in the force field,
Yeah.
you saw what he could do, and he flexed pretty hard.
Yeah.
But that was just momentary, you know, on occasion. But in this episode, you saw a lot of tenderness. You saw a lot of warmth. You saw a lot of feelings. You saw a lot of things that are very much, you know, in opposition of what it means to be Vulcan. Even though that he was trying to teach these kids discipline, he did it with such care, right? And he did it with such parental reverence, you know, to what it means to be, you know, someone who's going to help protect children. Now, Papa Bear.
Yeah.
You know
it's
Bear
funny
Vulcan.
for all the time we've ever spent on Mission Log talking about how bad a father Sarek is, how bad a father Worf is. And look, Sisko, definitely positive father role model. But even then, there's some weaknesses there.
He did not stick the landing on that.
He did not. I feel like Tuvok is quickly ascending to my favorite in Star Trek fathers.
Yeah. And, you know, it's not, I mean, Tiffany Taubman and Tim were just magical towards the end. I think that all the performances were very strong. But something that you brought up, John, touched on it a little bit, and this is in my notes, and I'm glad that we saw both of our experiences this way. There's been an interesting grouping of episodes recently that have consistently looked at some of the most extreme perspectives about life and death. Right? So let's take a look at Life Signs. Only a few episodes ago, the Doctor took these extreme measures to save Dinara and granted her temporary immortality, you know, which almost made her do a certain thing. In Death Wish, Quinn's desire to remove himself, i.e. suicide, from the Q continuum shook the entire continuum out of their complacency just to stop him from doing it.
Yeah.
So, and then now in this episode, we have this incredible subversion of expectations where we believe that these children are helpless, but it's just because of their confusion and their quote unquote mental innocence that allows us to go on this journey with Tuvok and see where at least Tressa ends up and how we were like, okay, that was unexpected, and this is a far, you know, more, I guess, realistic and tangible way of understanding what, like, our elderly are going through and how, you know, we react and our relationship with that. I never really gave it credit. I never really gave Voyager credit for being able to do that in a serialized way because it's not particularly, quote-unquote, serialized, but the themes kind of are.
Yeah, well, that's just it. Yeah, it's an episodic series, and you and I get frustrated when, it's the reset button, and we're just back to Planet of the Week, Journey of the Week. What, they blew up a shuttle? We'll have another one next week. But there's this heaviness, there's this theme of exploring death that has come with so many of these very good episodes. And this one right there among them. Voyager has had this really nice streak here in the second half of season 2, which has been, for lack of a better word, fascinating to watch. So how about, I take it that means that the episode holds up for you.
Yeah, and it did, again, the more and more I watched it, you know, it really did, yeah.
What about morals, meanings, messages? What do we take away from it?
Well, I found that it's interesting. Now, I wanted to go earlier with kind of like this understanding of technology, like versus like human interconnection and how it was lost in the Dreyan culture. That's something that I was like, okay, I'm almost there. But I really loved what Janeway said in the course of all of this, and especially at the end, where I think that she was almost speaking for us as the audience, where we finally understood like what was happening with these children, and then we finally understood like how the Drayans or how Alcea, they also didn't communicate their intent in the clearest way to create this relationship with us.
Yeah.
Right. So Janeway said, "I hope you can accept my sincere apologies for disturbing your traditions." And then Alcea says, "Perhaps we have each misjudged the other, Captain." And then Janeway said, and this is as fine of a message as Star Trek can promote, "I would hate to let that ruin any possibility of friendship between our people." So that in and of itself is at what the very heart of Star Trek has always been about, being able to come together and resolve our differences through discussion and sharing information and overcoming misunderstandings and misinformation by simply talking to each other. That's all it takes, is just when you have that moment, when the adrenaline's low, when the energy has dissipated through the room, and you have the ability to find and seize that moment where you can talk and literally understand every single finer point without, and maybe this is the Tuvok's point, without the influence of emotion to the logic, you might be able to actually do something and connect.
I'm so glad that that was your takeaway. That actually plays in very well to my first observation here for the morals, meanings, messages, because I was thinking about how this show, this episode, is about these perceptions and perspectives culturally that never quite align because they don't even know yet to have the conversation about what's happening. You know, to Janeway, it's like, look, here's just another culture. We have to negotiate to get what we want and hopefully, not leave with another enemy on our hands. And then here's Tuvok, I need to take care of these kids. And here's these kids, we're afraid we need somebody to take care of. But they keep missing each other in what they actually need to explain to have a mutual understanding. And I love that this is playing with these shifting cultural perspectives. So think about it. To the kids, there is no other concept, there's no other way they have to think about growing old and facing death than what they know. How could they not? This is all that they know. To Tuvok, unless there is some other culture and, Vulcan contact history that actually does this, there's no other way than what he knows about the cycle of life, birth and growing old and death. Everybody in this episode has to reset their understanding and expectation in order to find that common ground. And yeah, the Drayans were not forthcoming when they very much could have been. The kids are the innocents in this because they simply don't know. They don't have the mental faculty at this point to discuss it. Mm-hmm. But this is all a matter of that communication, being able to set each other on their own kind of cultural and philosophical expectations. We got there a little bit with the EMH, but then we needed to go a step further for them to hopefully avoid the conflict that they had. But what I love about this episode, I think what's most compelling to me, is the place that it occupies in this very difficult conversation. How do we have, and you were just hitting on it, how do we have these deep, important conversations about belief and truth while respecting those cultural traditions? Tuvok is able to engage with these kids about heavy concepts like death and belief and doubt, but no other Drayan will be aware of that conversation because the kids are resigned to their fate. And the Drayans have shut off all possibility of having their beliefs challenged until another thing like this, an unaccounted for interruption, comes along to shake them up. So there's a little bit of a condemnation of their very isolationist tactic there.
But not to belittle the intelligence of the children in general, especially these children. But do you think that they actually understood more of what Tuvok was telling them because they were already elderly?
I don't know. I'm going to go back to those lines about them reverting to a stage of innocence and being confused, that maybe truly their brains develop or undevelop to a point that they don't. Maybe they can't hold those concepts the way that an adult would. Maybe not, Yeah. Or I don't know. That's interesting speculation. Now, something that I love in this script is just all the wisdom that we get from Tuvok. And I quoted a few before, and I want to leave you with a few others that I just thought were awesome. We often fear what we do not understand. Our best defense is knowledge. 100% of the time, yes, Tuvok, well said. And also, Vulcans consider death to be the completion of a journey. There is nothing to fear. I like how he phrased that. And then he says, I realize it may frighten you, but you must hear the truth. And what he's talking about there is this, not just the truth of what happened in that cave, but the existential truth of what's going on in their situation. So I'll supplement that with one of my favorite Carl Sagan quotes that I have shared on this very podcast before, but it's worth sharing again. It is far better to grasp the universe as it really is than to persist in delusion, however satisfying and reassuring.
Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. If you would like to support us directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog for early access to shows and the Mission Log Discord. Our website is missionlogpodcast.com, and for more Star Trek news and discussion, visit trekmovie.com.
On the next Mission Log, The Thaw.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com. Special thanks to consulting producers, Adam Brusky, Matt Esposito, Homer Frizzell, John Mann, Mike Richards, and Mike Schabel. Everyone should have known better than to visit a planet with a dielectric field. I mean, any field that starts with die seems like bad news. End transmission.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.